If peace is there, but there's no electricity, how do you expect development to happen?
That's a challenge actually, because when we went to investment mission in Kuala Lumpur, the objective is to attract investments to Mindanao.
Yes.
Not just in Kuala Lumpur, but in all other countries that we've targeted. Mindanao could have a viable market for our products. The basic question is how reliable is the power supply? Although we have the
Correct.
cheapest, we're paying...
Cheapest in Mindanao,
Yeah,
in the
we're
Philippines.
paying
Yes.
around 6 pesos per kilowatt hour. Here in Meralco, you'd be paying around 13 pesos per kilowatt hour. So that's because we derive half of our supply from the cheaper hydro. Which is also, ironically, is giving us trouble as of the moment. So we wanted to move towards having that regime of reliable and sustainable power supply in Mindanao, keeping at pace with the rate of development also that we are now seeing. Over the last 2 years, we've been seeing the influx of malls. We have 3 malls built in Mindanao just last year, operating just weeks of duration, one after the other. We're seeing also the influx of business process outsourcing. A BPO center can be built in 6 months, requiring 1 megawatt capacity. So you need 3 years to build a power plant. So the pace of growth actually in industry is faster, and the pace of growth for investments in power is not moving at same pace.
So how are you going to deal with this bottleneck now?
That's why we're comfortable that with the entry of the new capacities, as well as the small ones that we're pushing now, the renewable energy projects, the small hydro, biomass, and even solar, would be able to at least provide that beyond narrow margin of supply in Mindanao.
Renewable energy is actually something the Philippines started early. Like hydropower is, you mentioned 54% of our is hydropower. Are we continuing on this path? Is sustainable energy a good way to move forward, considering coal-fired plants pollute, blah, 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 you know, all that? How do we maintain renewable or sustainable energy?
Right now in Mindanao, we're having a mix of about 60% renewable energy and 40% fossil, diesel and
That's very good.
Diesel and coal. But by 2016, we're expecting a reversal of the mix.
Because you wanted to jumpstart.
Yeah, with the entry of the coal-fired power projects, that will change the mix.
So isn't that a step backwards?
If you want to listen to the business perspective, they take a different context, because that will give them reliability of power supply.
Correct. Because hydropower, if there's no wind, you don't have energy. Yeah.
And hydropower is also contingent on how nature behaves. And unfortunately, with the current trend of climate change that we now experience, then we also need that comfortable level of capacity provided by this technology. But at the end of the day, what we wanted to pursue in Mindanao is a policy framework for renewable energy development, where we are able to maintain at least, if not 60-40, 50-50 mix. 50% fossil, and then 50% RE through hydro, and then biomass, and probably solar also, solar power projects. We only have one in the country today, which is 1 megawatt, that's in Cagayan de Oro. And we'd like more investors to come in and look at the viability of solar in several other areas in Mindanao.
Several questions again coming in from Twitter at It's Edward. Power supply deficit has always been a major problem here. Noon pa, so he lives in Mindanao. Why now? Why act only now?
Well, as I've said earlier, many of the private sector potential investors
are ready to invest.
Not ready, where they were quite apprehensive. If they will build that capacity, will the electric cooperatives contract their power supply? Second is that it's because the government was prohibited by IPIRA from building new power plants or buying new capacities. That's why, fortunately, we've seen some major breakthroughs in terms of looking at the rehabilitation of Agus and Pulangi. Last year, the government has approved 4.5 billion to rehabilitate Agus 1 and 2 and Agus 6, among the largest in the Agus complex. Agus 6, for instance, was built 60 years ago. It was just meant to last for 30 years. And 2.5 billion pesos budget for it was to extend it for the next 30 years.
So you're pushing the existing plants to capacity, and they're starting to break down, and that's part of also the reason. A question from Roy Diff, why is Iligan City still doing Earth hours? I think he's being. Are there still brownouts in Iligan when Agus is in their backyard?
Yeah, that's a funny question being asked by all other areas where the power plants are located. Like you have the geothermal in North Cotabato, and yet North Cotabato experiencing brownouts. You have the Agus in Lanao area in Iligan, and then you have Pulangi in Bukidnon, and yet many of these areas are experiencing brownout. When a power plant throws power to the grid, it throws directly to the grid, not to a specific electric cooperative. So that the electric cooperative will have to draw it from the grid. So it's centralized. Except when...
So geography doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Except when they have embedded capacities, like Davao has a standby generator which it can turn on anytime the load curtailment is high.
From at Gay Pinoy, why does the government privatize and let the profiteers wait for price hikes to make power generation profitable? Why punish Mindanao?
Well, we may have to ask the framers of the IPIRA law. The privatization of assets of the government previously under the call of the National Power Corporation was privatized to the private sector. Was handed to the private sector.
Yes.
Principally, one is to recoup or to pay off for the debts it has incurred for
several years.
And
which administration was this done under?
2001, so that would be under
President
GMA.
Arroyo.
But the discussions on the power bill at that time, the IPIRA bill at that time, dates back as early as the previous administrations.
Interesting. Well, this connects to that. This is frustration from at Arvin ZURC. Arvin Zurk. I see here the administration is not prioritizing looking for a concrete solution in an electric crisis. I guess it's moving so slowly. Is there a better way, a faster way to move getting energy?
I recalled one time Secretary Petilla saying if he can buy it in the hardware store, he would buy it now and deliver it to the areas. Yes. Unfortunately, there's no way that is going to be possible.
I actually remember this from the mid-90s. Remember, again, the rotating 10-hour blackouts where I remember looking for which city block we would...
And the power sector is heavily regulated. Everything has to go through ERC approval.
Yes.
Now, why is it like that? It's because everything in the power sector is passed on to the consumers. Yeah. So any investments in power is passed on to me, to us, to you, as payers of electric utility.
Including our debt, which is part of the reason
and therefore,
our electricity costs are high.
has to make sure that whatever rate application is filed by any private power generator is in accord within the reasonable bounds.